Michael Joseph. Go rock and roll, dude.
Okay. Well, Keith, thank you for having me on tonight. And I've like to go ahead and talk about, this idea of, Keith mentioned Treasury notes, and I would like to expound on that. I've invited a guest to come on as well tonight, David Merrill. Dave, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, excellent. Well, I would just like to, David was sort of the vein that pointed the way for me, taught me about this concept of United States notes in the form of Federal Reserve notes, and he pointed me in the direction where I could go and do the studies. And Dave, I don't know if you feel comfortable going ahead and taking the reins, or do you want me to continue?
Yeah, I'll just highlight the main points in history.
He's going to have to be a little bit louder.
Okay, I'll just highlight the main points in history and the Federal Reserve Act, and then turn it back over to you, Michael Joseph.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Okay, what I have available to me is what I call the Federal Repository, and you can try and find it maybe on a local college campus if you're in a large town. And it's a private campus here, basically Masonic, and it's called Government Documents. You might try and find it through your library system at Government Documents, but what you're looking for is a record of everything that happens in Washington, D.C. And that's where I learned a lot of these things from source materials. And starting with the 1789 Judiciary Act, we can go to Saving to Suitors on page 77 of Chapter 20, and that's saving to suitors in all cases the right of a common law remedy where the common law is competent to give it. And just on those words alone, that's the saving to suitors clause, and it's the basis of diversity, which is probably pretty important to some of the things you were just talking about with forming jural constructions and jural societies among other jural societies as embassies and boundaries and abutments and so forth. What I want to really stay on point with here is the idea that we have access to debt-free currency. And that's through the competent common law, like I was saying, and it's guaranteed to us. So in other words, the first sentence of the Federal Reserve Act itself says that it's to provide an elastic currency, to furnish an elastic currency. Well, what would elastic currency be? That doesn't sound very honest, and it certainly isn't. So the same Federal Reserve Act in Section 16 had to provide remedy for people that didn't want to deal with elastic currency, and it did. Now, that was codified. So what I just cited was Section 16 of the Federal Reserve Act. That was codified into the United States codes in Title 12, Section 411. And you can read it there today as they shall be redeemed in lawful money on demand. That's just the clause itself. And they shall be redeemed, meaning Federal Reserve currency notes or Federal Reserve notes. They've played around with that, the verbiage and the terminology a little bit in order to try and mask the idea that silver and so forth is U.S. notes have the same value as Federal Reserve notes when they actually shouldn't. So they've done a little bit of manipulation by changing the name to U.S. currency notes from U.S. notes and in another section of the U.S. Code. Not to get distracted with that, though. So
wait a minute. What's the difference between U.S. notes and U.S. currency notes?
There really isn't. It's just a word change that Congress did.
Could one be electronic and the other one be in paper?
No, I think they're both electronic. I mean, they both can be electronic.
Because currency means current, so I figured it was I don't want to, sidetrack you. I was just wondering because I'm sure somebody's going, what the hell does that mean? Because if they're playing around with it, they're going to go, well, what does that mean? In order to get them full disclosure, we got to get into that and say, well, this is what it means and that type of thing.
Well, the manifestation of it is that you can go down to a coin shop and buy a $10 United States note, it'll cost you quite a bit in the collector value. But if you take it over to Safeway, you're only going to get $10 worth of groceries with it.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
And that's how it manifests, this masking of U.S. notes and changing U.S. notes to U.S. currency notes in a section of the United States codes. That's up in I think that's Title 31, Section 5115, where you'll find that happened if you look into the notes. There's a site if you want to follow these things and actually read the United States codes. It's on Cornell Law, or law.cornell or something like that. You can Google it up and find it through Cornell's Law Library. And you can find all the United States codes. You just put in the title and the section. So they shall be redeemed in lawful money on demand. What that really means, and the way people keep getting wrapped around the axle, trying to get silver and gold and so forth through Congress's various manipulations in the terminology like we just covered, is they think that they have to manage what's going on the other side of the teller counter. And that is really, that's important that they put this into a separate ledger and keep it separate from the elastic currency or fractional reserve lending. But it's not anywhere near as important as you just documenting your demand. They shall be redeemed in lawful money on demand. If you take a look at the simplicity of that clause, all you have to do is make your demand, and whatever they hand you, you can presume is lawful money. Hence what Michael Joseph was saying is you can actually have debt-free currency in the form of Federal Reserve notes. And it doesn't really matter because you're not bonding the elastic currency because you've documented your demand. If you don't document your demand or you just simply endorse like everybody's doing now, that's actually your vote. And if you endorse private credit from the Fed, the Treasury's already got a first lien on whatever you buy with that private credit. You've already signed that you're handling private credit from the Fed. You're not endorsing or you're not redeeming the lawful money. Now, some of the history, actually it seems to go back to the formation of greenbacks and United States notes in the 1860s here in America. But United States notes have never been a reserve currency, meaning that they have to be 100% backed. They're fiat currency, not backed by silver and gold, but they have to be redeemable in silver and gold. And the U.S. notes were always 100% reserves. The reserves had to be 100%. But up in Canada, by 1871, with their Dominion notes, they decided to defraud themselves. That's the way the article reads now that I've got a hold of, and actually say that it was the Parliament up there was tricked into accepting about 20% reserves. So they went into reserve banking in 1871 up in Canada. And I believe that was a form of shock testing. They were actually trying it out up in Canada under the Crown Dominion notes. And by 1913, that shock test worked successfully enough that here in America we could do it with private banknotes called Federal Reserve notes. And they were only to be exchanged, and that's, you'll read in Section 411 of Title 12, they were only to be interbank notes between Federal Reserve banks. And that's all that they were supposed to be. That's all they were, the purpose of issuing them was for, is for private exchange between Federal Reserve banks. So they had this elastic currency that they were exchanging between Federal Reserve banks, and if you read the Federal Reserve Act, you also find out that these banks were formed on a 20-year charter. So that's where we come up with 1933. 1913 to 1933. In 1933, all these Federal Reserve banks were getting ready to call in their notes. And the original reading of that, Section 16 of the Federal Reserve Act, says they shall be redeemed in gold or gold certificates on demand. That got changed in 1934 to lawful money. So if you understand FDR's banker's holiday, you understand why they changed gold and gold certificates into hoarding at that time. and they changed it to lawful money. Lawful money meaning United States notes, and elastic currency being Federal Reserve notes. And so all these bankers wanted out, and they were producing a run. They were going to produce a run, and since they'd been dealing with fractional lending for 20 years, there wasn't enough gold and gold certificates to go around. So this is the real nature of the emergency that FDR was facing. And what he did is he opened it up so that the new bonds, the new trust process that was going to be happening through endorsement of your paychecks, from your salary checks, in 1933, the new form would be open for us, for everybody. Okay? If the general public wanted to get engaged in Federal Reserve banking, in other words, we could. And that way he saved the Fed. He announced it pretty clearly in the radio show to the state governors. There was a state governors convention during the bankers' holiday in March of 1933. He announced it pretty clearly, and I have that all documented. But what I'm really getting to is that since Federal Reserve notes are not to be issued for any other purpose than the exchange between Federal Reserve banks, when we endorse private credit from the Fed, we are acting as if we are Federal Reserve banks. And we're treated as such, and then we're required to send in a return for that privilege. And that return is a tax return. Now, I think I've covered a lot of the main points that I wanted to. Michael Joseph has covered, he's got some real great insight into trust construction and also just the simplicity, like he said, is that we have access to debt-free United States notes in the form of Federal Reserve notes. Now, on the website, the Treasury's website, we find that on January 21st, 1971, the Treasury itself made somewhat a declaration. It's not law. But in order not to have to keep printing presses available and going for United States notes, and everybody by that time, 1971, was really duped into just thinking the only way that I'm going to get my cash from my paycheck is to endorse it instead of non-endorsement or restricted endorsement.
Hey, David, can I stop you right there?
Yeah, go ahead.
For the people, if you will go to Yahoo or Google and type in U.S. Treasury, FAQ for frequently asked questions, legal tender, it'll take you directly to what David's talking about. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to try and remember that. So that's what I'm talking about. You go down to the last paragraph, you find in 1971 that the Treasury just determined, since nobody's demanding United States notes, we're not going to bother printing them anymore. There's still, I believe, $300 million in United States notes, and they're all kept in the vaults of the Federal Reserve banks, the 12 big ones. And this is to keep them from getting handled so they wear out and then they'd have to be replaced. So they're still considered in circulation. They're just not in a general circulation where they get destroyed by people handling them and tearing them up and so forth. This way they don't have to replace them periodically by setting up and tooling a whole new printing press to reprint these $300 million Federal Reserve notes. And if you read about those in Section 5115 of Title 31, and I think you can learn things from 5115 through 5118, but 5115 will tell you that United States notes are not a reserve currency, and therefore the amount of them, the $300 million I'm talking about, is a fixed amount. So you don't end up increasing the amount of currency like we do with Federal Reserve notes. When we endorse them, we increase the national debt. We produce more notes, somewhat out of thin air, but it's actually out of your bond, meaning that you promised the shirt on your back that you paid private credit for as a first lien to the Treasury.
Well, let's stop again.
Okay.
So you got a check that's made, you got your payroll check, and that payroll check says pay to the order of legal name, right?
Okay,
and
yeah, usually, uh-huh.
So it says pay to the order of. So if you endorse the backside of the check, you're ordering up new Fed credit. You're ordering up, new Fed credit, and so by doing so, you increase the national debt. Now go ahead.
Right, and so on the backside of the check, if you want to just start right now with your paycheck tomorrow, then above your signature you would write redeemed lawful money pursuant to Title 12, Section 411, and there's that double S for subsection 411, and then you'd sign your demand. That's the simplest way to do it. And the issue of your true name or your legal name, that's secondary. The main thing is you want to document your demand.
Now, David, what is a true name?
Well, true name is what your parents named you, meaning your first and middle name. And your family's name or your surname follows that to form a new construction called legal name, legal or full name. So your true name would be your first and middle name in a typical situation. Your parents brought you home from the hospital or whatever, and they named you Michael Joseph. And that's what they named you. And then they, being duped, taught you to think that your legal name is your name, even though you've known that you have two names all your life. A lot of people, I teach them their name for their first time. And once you understand that, so your signature would be, for instance, since you're doing business as the legal or full name, your signature, truthfully, is your first and middle name signed DBA, and then you put the name on the front of the check, which is the business or the trust or the fiduciary that you're actually signing for. You're doing business as the legal or full name, because that's probably the name that you gave your employer when you got hired on. So I think dealing in false balances is a lot more detrimental than dealing in true balances.
Sorry, I'm going to have to break in here. Just so everyone knows, because I'm watching the chat room, we're not abandoning that we want our own money. That's not, and by far, not going to happen. We're not abandoning that at all. What we're doing is everyone knows here the reality of our lives. The United States, as far as the United States Treasury is concerned, not treasurer but treasury, is going to be there probably until we die. The Federal Reserve, they hired on to service their accounts, is what they did. That's actually the relationship between the United States and the Federal Reserve. I don't like the Federal Reserve any more than anybody else does. No one likes the Federal Reserve. There's not probably other countries that could do without it. No one really wants it. No one really wants the corporation. I've read some of the Restore America Plan deal lately, and they're talking now people of the Republic, okay, which is now a corporation, so and artificial entity. So what I'm saying is we're not abandoning the organic. We're not abandoning anything. What I'm saying is that if we can do business with them from the counties having our own money, and then others wanting to come up and say, well, I want U.S. Treasury notes, fine. You can have them in the form of Federal Reserve notes from here. That way everyone's still working together, but we still have our independence.
So you're saying then the county would have an access easement so that it wouldn't be trespassing on the U.S. Treasury to use United States notes in the form of Federal Reserve notes.
Correct. We're not bothering anyone. We're not hurting anyone. We're not trying to put anybody out of business, and we're not trying to compete with them. But we would still have our own money. Now, our own money, here's the catch, has to be mineral-backed. So, anybody got any minerals out there? That's where our problem is. Because most people are mortgaged up to the hilt, and most of them don't have mineral rights to the land in their titles.
Hang on, Keith.
If they have a land patent, they've got mineral rights, but why? What's up?
Well, they may not have. Does anybody out there have any land that has minerals that they can't get to? If they do, they need to talk to us.
Right, because you have to have a land patent, and then once you have a land patent, the internationals will tell you just because you have a land patent doesn't mean you have mineral rights, and that's not true.
Well, if I can, I'll just continue where he picked off and left off, rather, and I just would say the important thing to comprehend is that, right now, people want to talk about, well, Federal Reserve notes are worthless, and we'd rather have gold and silver, and we're going to take our notes and go get gold and silver, but at the end of the month, when they get their paycheck cashed, for some reason they want those notes so they can go put food on their table. And that's the reality which we currently live in and under, and until that reality changes, we've got to figure out how we can effectively move about so that we don't incur obligations that we don't need. And so the important thing to comprehend is that, if you don't redeem those notes or those checks, those, I'll call them Federal Reserve credit instruments, then number one, you're increasing the national debt because you're introducing new debt as you order up new Fed credit, and you are placing your vote. If you want to talk about voting, that's where you vote. You don't vote in the voting booth. You vote for where you are in both jurisdiction and venue when you sign the back of your payroll check. You endorse the back of it and just sign your name, the legal name that's really not even yours, but I won't go to that at this point. Well, there you go. You just bonded everything that you will buy with those notes, and you've bonded yourself. You've bonded your sweat equity to cover, that endorsement. That's what he meant by the Fed, by an operation of law, getting first lien. Congress, however, you talk about, we'd like to go back to what Lincoln did and issued greenback monies that is government-issued money and that it doesn't have debt associated with it. We could flourish under that system. And that's what United States notes are. So when you effectively non-endorse the Federal Reserve credit instrument, the check, the payroll check, and
could it be a Social Security check also?
It could be any check.
Okay.
Yeah, I especially love to teach people to do it with federal issued checks. But it could be any check. So, when you do that, you have just, here's the thing. Every time you endorse Fed credit, you increase the debt. Every time you non-endorse Fed credit, here's what happens on the other side of the teller window. Even though if it was me and I'm just looking to put food on my table at the end of the day for my family, I really don't care what they do on the other side of the teller window. But this is what effectively happens. That in order for those, let's say you got a check for $1,000 and you non-endorse it, so you don't order up 1,000 new Fed notes. What you're going to do is you're going to non-endorse it, so you're going to get United States notes in the form of Federal Reserve notes. And in order for you to be able to do that, those notes have to be taken off the reserve. And so what happens is the Federal Reserve has to return to Congress $1,000 worth of bonds that it's holding, and they keep track of all that in the form of the federal debt. So you see, when you effectively non-endorse that check, you're reducing the national debt by the amount of your non-endorsement. But when you endorse the back of your check, number one, you're agreeing by your signature that you're in Federal Reserve banking, that the legal name which you are operating through, is a Federal Reserve Bank, and you just increased the national debt by the amount of debt currency you just ordered up. Very important concept to get. United States notes in the form of Federal Reserve notes are not debt currency. So if I don't drive any other concept into your head, realize that in 1971 they quit printing United States notes because they didn't need to print them anymore. They had the United States seal on the right-hand side of the note and the Federal Reserve seal on the left-hand side of the note. And so the note that you get says Federal Reserve note on the top, but look at the bottom. It says United States dollars or $1 or $100 or whatever, right? So that note has it's a dual capacity note, and it's either a debt-free currency note or it is a debt note, Federal Reserve note. Now, you might... Hello?
Michael. Yeah, Michael Lenny. We've got an interesting question here. Somebody says, how do I get that endorsement on my Social Security check when it's direct deposited?
Direct deposit is a trick. Direct deposit, let me get it. They know the people are lazy, and if you're one of those that shoe fits real good on, then you need to go ahead and perk your ears up real good. And I don't really care if I'm hurting your feelings, because hopefully maybe this prick in your ears is going to get you to, to start moving in a way that's going to allow you to keep more of your paycheck. If you have direct deposit accounts, credit accounts, credit cards, these are all ease of living, if you will, tricks in order to get you to accept private credit, and you have no means whatsoever to redeem it. If it goes from one computer screen to another, there's no way you can get in the middle and effect a remedy that you can rely on. Now, I want to just make it clear to those that are listening, if you can, write down Title 12, Section 411. It's only one paragraph long, and, my daughter, who's 8 years old, comprehends it no problem. It is, anybody can go read it and understand. It's only one paragraph long, and get up, go to the web page and read it. It says Federal Reserve notes. It says they can or may be redeemed or shall be redeemed into lawful money, cut out the obfuscation, at any Federal Reserve bank. Well, that means they're not lawful money, and they may be redeemed. But what I want you to notice, it doesn't say whether or not an oral demand, they can be redeemed. You just have to make a demand, whether or not you say, hey, I want lawful money, which would be just fine, or whether or not you write it down on the back of your check, which would be just fine. If you just get that very simple thing, and you are able to wrap your mind around that construct, you've got it. It's all in between your ears. They shall be redeemed on demand. Now, I would posit to you that you make your demand in writing, and you make copies of everything that you effectively endorse. I mean, any man or woman who is competent in their affairs keeps records. And if you're not keeping records, then, you don't be one of those who just lollies through life and doesn't keep records and says, oh, I always get run over and I can't figure out why. Keep your records. Keep your administrative records of you making your demand for lawful money. And that way, if anybody ever comes knocking and says, hey, here, we got record here that there's a W-2 here, says you got $100,000 this past year, and you didn't you're not filing a tax return, and so we want to know what the heck's going on here. You say, well, sure, glad to meet you over here at Starbucks. And here's a check at the beginning of the year, here's a check at the middle of the year, and here's one at the end of the year. And as you can see, I've been redeeming these checks all through the year. And so I don't have any income as I've not been using private credit of the Fed, and therefore I don't have to pay the use fee. So it's a trust, so you got to pay the use. You got the obligation of the use. And so since I've not been handling or using private credit of the Fed, well, there you go. And, believe me, it'll take 5 minutes for him to call his boss, and he'll come back and say, have a nice life. That is it's so simple that it runs people over like a Mack truck. It can't be that simple. They've been searching their whole lives. How can it be that simple? Well, it is that simple. You just have to make your demand for lawful money. And
all right, Michael, on the back of checks, what exactly do they need to write?
Well, it says, they got to make a demand. So what I write, or what I used to write, is demand is made for lawful money per 12 U.S.C. 411. And David Merrill, he goes ahead and goes a step further. He likes to show that it's already occurred, so he just writes redeemed in lawful money pursuant to 12 U.S.C. 411. It's exactly the same thing. What you're doing is you're showing any agent of the United Nations, we're talking about the IMF or the Federal Reserve or Trust 62, the IRS, that you know the remedy and you made your demand. That's all you're doing. In MAT law, all you have to do is make the demand, and you're now using debt-free currency.
Okay, so if anybody wants to get rid of the Federal Reserve out of their life, then all they got to do is say, demand is made for lawful money per Title 12, Section 411, and sign it?
Yes, and now what David was talking about before, he was talking about signing it true name, doing business as, like true name, DBA, legal name. Now, I'm telling you, that is the purest form of the law, because my name is Michael Joseph. Now, I'm not going to get into the trust, which is legal name, but I'm just going to call it legal name. I'm going to say first, middle, last for anybody on the call who's catching up to me. Now, that first, middle, last is actually a trust. So a trust can be, in some sense, a business, and you, the living soul, are doing business as the legal name. So if you want to be a purist, I would say true name, DBA, legal name. But if you want to make sure that the teller just gives you what you want and you walk out the door, just sign legal name.
Just sign your first and middle name.
Yeah, because nobody can tell you how to sign a document. Now, if you've got a driver's license, that signature that you put on the check had better match the signature on the driver's license. So, or else you're not going to be able to cash the check. So, and the teller will typically, in my experience in the past, is going to look at it like a deer in the headlight and, what's this? Did you write this? And you just have to know that at the end of the day, you're walking out of there with notes, and if she gives you he gives you any trouble, you just say, look, if you need to speak to your boss, I'll wait. And believe me, they are not going to get in the way of people exercising their remedy, and they will give you back the notes. They have to.
So, Michael, when people do this, they go cash their check at the bank. You're saying they can't deposit that check in the bank. They got to pull that cash out and walk out with legal money in their hand.
No, lawful money.
Lawful money. Let's just stop for 1 second, Lenny. Hold your point, and I want to drive this down because what you just said will put a lot of minds to sleep. Federal Reserve notes are lawful to use, and be careful about the construct because they will slick you right out of your inheritance based on that construct alone. Federal Reserve notes are lawful to use. but they are not lawful money as defined at 12 U.S.C. 411. Okay, so if you get into this, well, I got lawful money, they're going to laugh and say, hell, Federal Reserve notes are lawful. And if you can't articulate the argument to a third grade level, see, if you can articulate your position to a third grader, well, they know the jury sitting there is going to be about the education of a third grade level. And they're going to be sitting there thinking, I pay my fair share. What makes this clown so special? But if you can show them the truth, you become very dangerous. They don't want you there. If they think they can trick you, well, they might go ahead and proceed. So anyway, Lenny, coming back to your position, what did you?
When a man or woman brings a check and they endorse the back correctly, they sign their first and middle name on the back, and then flip it over, and on the front.
Hold on one second. If the name that you sign on the back of that check had better match the signature on your driver's license. If the driver's license is first, middle, last, it better match first, middle, last on the driver's license.
Okay.
So you for all the people, you could figure out how to make that work. That's all I got to say about that.
Okay, but here's my question. When I hand that check over to the teller, that check is not to be posited into a bank account. It's supposed to be handed to me in lawful money, and I take that money and walk out of there.
That's right. The moment you deposit that check into a checking account, it goes into one or two categories depending on how you deposit it. You can deposit a check for credit only, in which it goes into a holding pattern. Credit is not taxable. If you deposit the check for credit only, it can sit there for credit only, and how you pull it off the account is whether or not you got a taxable event or not. But if you are like, me, when I first started learning the remedy some 4 years back, I was like, to hell with depositing money. I'll take the cash. I'll just go and get me a vault, and I'd go if the check was drawn on an account where I didn't have a checking account, I would just go to one of those banks and go cash the check there and walk out with cash. Now, they're going to get a transfer fee, and rightfully so. They should. So if you get checks drawn on Bank of America and you got an account on Wachovia, well, what are you doing going to Wachovia to cash the check? And you say, oh, well, I can save $3 if I go to Wachovia. Well, yes and no. You better have enough on account to cover the surety, because they'll hold your account surety in case it bounces. All right, but what if you went to Bank of America and said, okay, I want to cash the check? And they said, okay, yeah, no problem. It's just going to cost you, $6 to cash it here. You say, okay, yeah, no problem. You say, well, I don't want to give up $6 every time I cash a check. Well, how about giving up 50% of it? Say, well, this is just too hard. You mean to tell me how do I pay my bills? Well, the international postal money orders, post office money orders. You mean I got to get in the truck and go buy money orders and I got to pay with cash? Well, yep, or go ahead and continue giving up 50%. So, things have been made easy for the lazy, and the lazy get ripped off coming and going, and that's just the way it is.
Michael, I guess those folks that cash, let's say, a large check, and they don't want to deposit that into the bank, they could always go, and they're not comfortable with keeping that kind of money at their home. They can always get like a safety deposit box at that bank, couldn't they?
You can get safety deposit boxes. Hotels are great places to get safety deposit boxes. They always have tons and tons of empty boxes that are unused on a regular basis.
Are those cheaper than banks?
Absolutely. With the bank, you can't get one unless you have an account there.
Cool.
So there's all sorts of ways to do that. Now, I will say this: if you read, and I know if you read a banking agreement, your eyes might be opened significantly if you decide to go ahead. If you go ahead and take your no-dos and see if you can get through the first 4 or 5 pages. But if you read it, they can terminate at cause. They don't have to have a reason to terminate. So if you start coming in there and you're dealing with local bank, and it's mom and pop bank's been there for 100 years, it's local to that community, and you start coming in and you start cashing $30,000 checks at a time, you can bet your bottom dollar they're going to close your account because you're running them out of business. Because every time you cash a check, let's say you cash a check for $5,000, they just had to go into their reserves and take $5,000 out of their reserves. Now, let me just stop for a moment and describe how banking works for those who don't know. If you take $1,000 and you go and deposit it on account, you endorse the Fed on the back side and you deposit it on account. You've opened the door, you've endorsed the Fed, they go ahead and drop the $1,000 on account. Now, here's what they do with it. They take 100 of it and they go put it in their reserves. They take 900 that's left and they multiply it by 10, creating 9,000, but remember, minus 900. So they just created, there's 900 still sitting on account, and there's 8,100 in book entries that they just put on their books that they can loan out at whatever interest rate they can get. Now, if you just really comprehended what I just said, and if you've been endorsing the Fed, you could do the same thing, which is why you must pay the use fee at the end of the year because, you did do that. But if you didn't do that, well, you could have done it. But see, most people think when they see that all caps name that's their name, and so they don't comprehend that they're actually running a business, in a sense, and that business is a Federal Reserve Bank. Now, the OCC, or the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, just turned over their new head. If you go look, I think the new guy is Dugan, who just came in, I think, August the 15th, I think. And one of the first things they did is they issued a notice that they are going to start regulating. I can't remember how it was put out, but they are going to start regulating unregulated Federal Reserve banks. That's not how it went, but that's what it meant. Now, who do you think they're talking about? They're talking about every man and woman that walks down there in legal name and endorses the back of their check. Go read Title 12, Section 411. Federal Reserve notes are issued to Federal Reserve banks and for no other authorized purpose, period.
In other words, they know the people are deceived, and they're trying to regulate that to a point where people starts waking them up, and then it gets harder and harder for them to endorse a check. And people are going, what the hell are you doing, all this? And then it'll open them up to saying, hey, you just have to do it this way. And this will solve your problem.
Yep, but all along the way, I hope that, if you've been paying attention, you've noticed it's all voluntary.
Yep, in order to move the voluntary action over, they start regulating.
So effectively, to drive the nail down, if they start regulating, and see, no one's ever told you had a choice, but they published it in the Federal Registry, and the Federal Registry is a fiction. The United States is a fiction. Legal name is a fiction. So the moment they published it on the Federal Registry, all fictions were noticed. They published it for, you see how convenient it is at law, but anyway, they publish it for 30 days. No one raises a peep, because who reads the Federal Registry? And boom, there they go, off and running. Just like Basel III was just published August the 25th. And everybody on the call was going, what's Basel III? Well, Basel III is the home rule in banking. It's the final rule. It was just published August the 25th. And people say, well, what do I have to do with that? Well, you've been in private federal banking. You've been in private Federal Reserve banking. So it has everything to do with the bank you're running.
So what these guys are trying to tell you, and what was his name?
David Merrill?
Yeah. What he was trying to tell you guys was he was trying to get you out of the Federal Reserve System, not pull you back in.
That's right.
And that's what a lot of people were freaking out about, because it's like one guy, well, we'll print our own money. We'll do that. Yeah, we got it. No problem. That's not a problem. What he was trying to do is tell you here, right now, all we have are Federal Reserve notes and United States Treasury notes. The biggest fear that the Federal Reserve has is being voted out to where they can't do it anymore. In other words, if over 50% of the people in the country start using lawful money from Title 12, Section 411, all those votes start going out. You'll see the national debts just start getting lower and lower and lower. In other words, the people are voting out the Federal Reserve System.
That's right.
That's what's happening. So what he was trying to tell you was, here's how you get out of the Federal Reserve.
That's right. That's the remedy. The remedy is written in the law, and he started at saving to suitors, because you have to start at saving to suitors in 1789. If you don't start there, you cannot grasp that it is voluntary. To save, you got to look it up in the dictionary. To save means to exempt. And so all the men were exempted of all this stuff in the United States districts and the Federal Reserve districts. Every man and woman are exempted. You must voluntarily submit to it. So how could Geithner and Paulson get up and Bernanke get up on the floor and say, how could Bernanke get up on the floor and say, well, this is the system in which the people have chosen? Well, because the national debt keeps going up and up and up. Obviously, it's the system the people have chosen. And how can the courts sit in there and just they don't? You can run your mouth till the cows come home. They don't care. Why can they do that? Because clearly you've been endorsing private credit. They can listen. Every single thing that you do at a bank is recorded. Your picture's taken. The check is scanned. They can pull it up in a New York second. And don't think for a second the judge can't pull up every transaction that's done on legal name on their computer sitting at bench. And you say, oh, I'm not in the Federal Reserve District, I'm over here. Okay. Okay. Click, click, click. All right, tell him what he wins, Johnny. 6 months in jail.
So the harshness of judges and the harshness of these people, what they're trying to tell you is, hey, we don't even want the Federal Reserve System in here, but we have to uphold choice. And if you guys keep choosing to endorse the back of a check, then it's going to get worse and worse and worse until you start going to the lawful money.
That's right. That's exactly right. And then the judge, what's the judge doing? The judge is people say, well, the judge is my enemy. They are always out to get me. They're greedy. They're this, they're that, they're whatever. The judge is upholding the contract in which the people have agreed to by endorsement. And that's the end of it, and that's just the way it is.
So if the people start just turning over and saying, okay, as long as they're with this type of system, and like I said, we can have our own money on the county, but that's going to be a long way off. This is what I was trying to explain to a lot of you before. That's a little bit of ways off here. That takes a little bit of time to get that done. But for right now, you have a group of people in the federal government, you have a lot of them in the state governments that are trying to tell you, hey, we already have a system in place here. Now, Kentucky has put up the boundaries again. up in the Kentucky legislature in the very first chapter has now reestablished the boundaries of Kentucky. They've also put up an expatriate statute that they wrote, and to expatriate from one state to another. So now the states are beginning to acknowledge citizenship, or to be a citizen. They've never done that before, guys. Not in my lifetime. I went around in the Louisiana state capitol. I was there with my wife. She was working, so I had nothing else to do. So I went and walked around the Capitol building for a while. I asked almost every office on every floor, do you guys have citizen passports, state citizen passports? I understand that they're red and blah, blah, blah. No, we have no idea what you're talking about. There's no such thing as a state citizen. Now, the Kentucky legislature has put in a citizen of this state. If you want to expatriate from this state, you can do so. And that's this state in all lowercase letters. This state is the attorney state, or the Federal Reserve District state, that was created in 1945. So you can now expatriate going before an executive judge, executive administrator. You can actually leave the Federal Reserve District now. They're acknowledging the differences.
The way you, if I can, the way you leave the Federal Reserve Districts is stop endorsing the Fed. As soon as you stop endorsing the Fed, you're out.
That's right. But the statute's in place to tell you this is what's going on. We're acknowledging all this stuff. They're beginning to do it.
But look at the judges. If you'll go and look up the history on the judges down there at the courthouse, you'll notice that the judge is running a business, and if you'll look even more careful, if you go to like martindale.com, you'll look up their Martindale, MARTINDALE.com. You can look up any active attorney, and you can get their number. You can get what district they're practicing in. You go to the Bar Association on the state, you'll get exactly what district they're in. And, you know, if they're in District 10, sub-district, you know, J or whatever, those are the Federal Reserve Districts. So the court itself is sitting and collecting in the Federal Reserve Districts. The New Deal, everybody's endorsing it. 99% of the people you know have no clue about lawful money. They're all endorsing the Fed. And so if they're endorsing the Fed and the money is backed by the good faith and credit of the people, on whose shoulders go the national debt? On everybody that endorses the Fed.
Now, when you endorse the Fed, guess what starts coming in, guys? Well, they want to eliminate 2/3 of the people of the world. That's what just about happened. That was going to happen. Now, it's slowed down quite a bit, if not stopped at all. Because the other countries were going, we ain't playing this game. This ain't going to happen. So, what we have to do for right now, which is the next step, is stop endorsing the Fed. So the people that are what we call in the system are accepting checks right now, just do it this way for now. That tells them, hey, the people are getting it. They're beginning to understand. Everything's starting to get cool. And now they can come back to the Fed and say, wait a minute, y'all don't have a proper endorsement here. They just didn't know any different. And a proper endorsement with deception is not a proper endorsement.
Well, that's right, but I want you to notice one more thing. Sheriff's Department is an instrumentality, or an agency rather, of the United Nations, and the United Nations has an instrumentality of it called the IMF, and the IMF has instrumentalities called the Federal Reserve. So you might take another hard look at Sheriff's Department, take another hard look at Metro Police Officer, They are all Federal Reserve revenue officers. And they can collect, because the Scripture says those who are in debt are slaves to the one there, to the lender. So, you've heard of debtors' prisons and all these things. Well, they've got scriptural backing to do it. You did endorse the Fed, so therefore you're in agreement that Metro police officer, he pulls you over and he wants to this, that, and the other, and slaps you around and says, get in the car and do what I tell you to do, and you want to argue back. Well, the root of your problem is based in the remedy, which is at Title 12, Section 411. Don't endorse the Fed, non-endorse it. Because none of those agencies could exist except within the venue of the Federal Reserve districts. That's where they exist.
So I'll say it again for everyone. Pass this around. Let people know what's going on. Once they understand it, then the United States, we call it, not elected officials. What's the other term? Shoot, I can never remember that stupid term, Lenny.
Appointed?
Appointed?
Public? Appointed?
Yeah, they're public officers. Anyways, its demand is made for lawful money per Title 12, Section 411. Then only sign your first and middle name.
Now look, I'm gonna offer something to people on the call. If I was you, I would start incorporating that into every single document you sign. I mean, if you don't realize that every single piece of paper you get in the mail isn't commercial, well, then you don't get it.
I was going to bring that up next.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Because everything they put in there, it's in there, is either a coupon or money or sum of value. So you can start doing this on the back of your bills and stuff like that, so they understand that hey, you're making a vote here. You're on the lawful side of this. Okay, you're telling them I'm not endorsing the Federal Reserve anymore. That all goes on record. They're looking for this to start happening. This is no accident that this is coming out.
Guys, I'll just mention that I think, Keith, you just said spread this far and wide. Well, we probably have some new people that are on here that don't know how to do that. If you come to TalkShoe, our TalkShoe number is 85200, and you'll be able to download this recorded message tonight, and you can email it, you can download it yourself, and send it to your friends. Let them hear it.
Yeah, let them understand that every time they get a check. Now, if you've got a direct deposit, cancel a direct deposit. If they don't want to cancel it, close the damn account.
That's right. Close the account. And now you have an impossibility. It's going to bounce back to them. Now your employee's holding that, and if they don't get it to you, that's a tort.
That's right.
So they'll come to you and say, hey, your paycheck just bounced back to us. And you say, yeah, well, I don't have the ability to get a checking account. Well, if you don't have the ability to get a checking account, they can't ask you to do an impossibility, so they have to give you a check.
Then you go to their bank, cash a check there, and that with that verbiage on the back.
And I would go one further. Walmart cashes checks all day long, and they only charge $3 to do it. And Walmart is a Federal Reserve bank. Clearly, they use Federal Reserve notes, so that's why Walmart's with the money center.
Right. Now, when it starts getting on record, and you start creating a precedence that you're not endorsing, all of a sudden, the IRS can't come around you anymore.
They will not come around you.
All of a sudden, the IRS bills start going away.
Let's talk about IRS one more time.
Say you get a notice of lien in the mail. Wonderful. Turn it over on the back, endorse it that way, and send it back to them. That'd be the end of it.
If you can show them, now look, if you've been endorsing private credit, and I want you to, everybody here has probably seen notice of federal tax lien. And you might ask yourself, how come they didn't go to the court? I mean, what's a notice? I mean, they're just telling me that this is a possible. No, they're telling you it exists. This is notice of the existence of a federal tax lien. And you say, well, hell, we never went to court. We never did. That's right. You've already voted. It was a self-executing judgment. They scan every document you sign, so they know what you've endorsed, and they fractionalized and they banked on it, and tons and tons of banking has occurred. If you truly understand the power of fractional reserve banking, $1,000 can multiply into untold, 50s of thousands in a short period of time. If they make the next loan for $9,000, the guy comes back and drops it in the same account. I mean, it can expand. That's why the banks are sitting on top of every big building downtown. Fractional reserve banking. And
that's why a little trailer turns into a huge building in 6 months.
Just book entries. But those book entries, and you might say, well, I brought... Hello? Well, you say, well, I deposited $200,000 on account. Okay, let's look at the promissory note at a mortgage. Okay, let's say you went to buy a house that's $200,000. You signed that promissory note, and you just gave it a blanket open endorsement. You didn't do any disclaimers. You didn't make a demand for lawful money. Well, what did you just order up? Fed credit. Why? How come the trustees show up and say, "Sir, get out of our house"? Because it was bought in Fed credit.
Okay, Michael Joseph.
The bankers are enforcing a higher agreement.
Yeah, if somebody that has a Skype, you're going to have to just mute out *6, and whoever has a speakerphone on a cell phone, you're going to have to mute out *6 because it bounces back when you do that.
So, Michael Joseph, back to the IRS thing. When you when you cash a check, you're making a copy of that check, aren't you, for your records for the IRS?
The moment I get the check, if it's non-endorsed, I make a copy of the front of the check. I make a copy of the back of the check, and usually I'll scan it also into my computer, so I've got a digital record as well. Then I'll go down to the bank. I'll go ahead and do the transaction at the bank, and I'll get the notes, and then I'll go use them however I want to use them. But now I've got my administrative remedy in place that I redeemed that check, and that Now look, just to be clear here, non-redeemed federal instruments is income. Start thinking of it like that. You'll never find that definition anywhere, but income equals, that's when you are endorsing Fed credit, you've got income. And therefore, you're subject to the income use fee, in brackets, tax, close brackets.
Okay.
Now, can you imagine this? Yeah, go ahead, Lenny.
No, go ahead, Keith. Go ahead.
Okay, can everyone imagine this? What everyone has been trying to accomplish, that's all you have to do, and all of a sudden, all your problems start going away. You've already endorsed the right hand of the Father with lawful money right there. In other words, you're signing, and you're saying, I want to be on the right hand of the Father. That's what you're saying through the money. That's your vote right there. You just made a decision to do that. And it's as simple as demand for lawful money per Title 12, 411, and then sign it your first and middle name, and that's all you have to do. All of a sudden,
you sign it, but just be real careful. You sign it with the same signature that's on your driver's license.
Right.
Your first and middle's not on your driver's license until you get a new driver's license. You sign it whatever's the signature on your driver's license.
Right, and there's one more point I wanted to make, guys. Legal is not what you see happening here today in the courtrooms. The term legal does not endorse what you see going on in the courts today with attorneys. They are not in legal process. Legal process is common law. Same difference. They start calling it legal. Because they'll bring up administrative part, because the Constitution was dealing with committees and they were dealing in administrative remedies. That was all. So you can't assume or connect legal with corporations or fictions. It doesn't work that way. I've been back and read in the books in the 1800s and 1700s. Their terms of legal were dealing with flesh and blood people, men and women. When they said legal, that meant men and women. Okay, we can hear you. If you could just, instead of me having to go mute out a bunch of people that aren't making noise, if you could just mute out *6, that'd be great. So you have to change the way that your thinking is, because there's been a lot of crap going on in the so-called patriot movement. And in that movement, there's been a lot of agents trying to get you away from legal and all those terms by changing it or making it to your detriment. But that's not a legal process. That's not even a judicial process. Everything in this country has been diminished by this Federal Reserve System that wants you to endorse them to your detriment, to where eventually they would have enough power to destroy 2/3 of the people in the world.
Well, it's administrative, and the reason why it's administrative is because the officers are administering the trust. And that legal name is a trust, whether you know it or not, it is. And so the court is an administrative court, and they're just administrators administering the trust. And you are with the judicial authority because you're the one who brought the judgment on your own head. And you say, well, let's go to Scripture. Okay, let's go to Proverbs 11:1. Go check it out, Proverbs 11:1. Let's go to Deuteronomy 25:13. See what Yah thinks about false balances, but you say I'm all for that. Yeah, we need just and balanced. We need just and equitable balances. Okay, well then stop endorsing the Fed.
Okay, now let's go to bonds. You want to know what a police officer's bond is? If it's in Fed credit, it's not a bond, guy. He's not bonded.
Well, who's bonding the police officer?
Fed credit.
Who bonds the police officer if you're in the Federal Reserve districts? You do. You voted. You voted. Your vote back there. They don't need oaths or bonds. You voted on the back of the paycheck. I endorsed the Fed. You are bonding the police officer and all the agents of the Federal Reserve and all the officers and trustees. That's what
okay,
I'm trying
guys, hang on a second. Hang on 1 second now. We have some people on here tonight that are new or fairly new, and they're hearing you guys talk, and they're thinking, well, I got a pocket full of credit cards, and I've got a ton of credit card debt and signature loans. What do you have to say to those folks? What do you want to say to those folks?
Stop using credit cards. Is what I got to say to them.
Let your credit card introduce it to a pair of scissors.
Yeah.
And say, hello, Mr. Scissors.
Hey, Lenny, I have another operation question, if I may, for Michael Joseph.
Go ahead.
Thanks. So that's the first step. Keith, you're right, chopping up all those credit cards. Now, yesterday, Michael Joseph, you had said that $6,000 was the threshold for filing your returns. And I thought, of course, $600 is the threshold for reporting any kind of income. If we take your step whereby from here forth you're non-endorsing and you're taking all U.S. notes in the form of Federal Reserve notes from this day forward, so you don't have any more income, are you still going to be filing any kind of a 1040, or from there forth you're done? You don't need to do any more 1040s.
That's an excellent question, and I want to answer it in two ways and I'm going to answer it one way, and then I'm going to come and answer it another way. When you file a 1040, you're actually acting as trustee. You become trustee because you're taking action for the trust, and the IRS will then have you in their master file as trustee. And trustees are always guilty until they prove themselves innocent, and trustees always have to pay the bill until they prove themselves not having to pay the bill. So it's not the other way around. You're innocent until proven guilty. Not in the trust relationship. Trustee is always guilty until he proves himself innocent. So there you go. If you file that 1040 form, just go ahead and just realize with eyes wide open, you're trustee. Now, if you have less than $6,000 of income, or let's say it another way, you have or you've endorsed a federal credit up to $5,999. You're less than $6,000, then you do not have to file a return. And that doesn't necessarily mean the IRS won't come calling, and if they do, you just show them your checks, no problem. Now, let's say you work for the state or you work for an employer who is doing withholding, and you've taken every single check that they have written you that year, and you went and redeemed it for lawful money. At the end of the year, they may have withheld, $5,000-$6,000, right? And you might be thinking to yourself, it sure would be nice if I could get that $5,000-$6,000 back. So how do you get it back? You just do a 1040 form. You show zero income, and you claim the entire withholdings back. You in the signature line, you say see Exhibit A, and you show them checks from the first, middle, and end of the year. And you claim it, and you'll get every bit of it back, and you'll probably get interest back with it because they had the use of it for that term. So they'll give you a check back, right? Because the IRS isn't going to issue you cash. They're going to issue you back what they have, and it's your option of whether or not to go get lawful money. Just because they pay you in a private credit instrument doesn't mean you have to accept that. You're now with the voluntary action of endorsing it or redeeming it. So you just take that IRS check to any bank, because any bank will cash an IRS check. You sign the back of it. Demand is made for lawful money per 12 U.S.C. 411, and there you go. You got your. Now, what are you going to do the next year? You're going to take that in to your boss, and you're going to say, "Boss, just wanted to let you know the IRS agrees that you don't need to do any withholdings on me from here on, so I'm going to give you a waiver, and I'll go ahead and sign that for you, and you no longer need to give any to keep any withholdings on me." So there you go, and you start going ahead and getting 100% of your check each month or however you get paid, and
and he will end up doing a 1099 on you at the end of the year, which is not requiring you to file.
Yeah, just because someone does a W-2 if you're an employee or a 1099 if you're a contractor, so what? That's what the corporation has to do for its records. That doesn't mean that you have to file. And it just means that they paid out that much private credit to you. Now, what you did with it is the voluntary nature of taxation. Did you redeem it, or did you endorse it? If you endorsed it, you need to go ahead and file. If you redeemed it, then there's no need to file.
I'm sure everybody's sitting here in shock.
They'll have to listen to it 2 or 3 times. Well, Keith, as a follow-on, I have a question for you about that, actually. And the follow-on is, when you are in the private, you've done your Form 101, you've moved over, because we have a whole hybrid of people on this call from novice first listeners to those that have done a Form 101. So for the people that have done a 101, that come over to the private, they're on the rural routes, a lot of those people are probably still straddling the fence. They still have their bank accounts that are open, credit cards possibly even, and they're unwinding those pieces day by day. Are they are they trespassing by using the escrow name, the legal name, if you call it that, with their bank accounts, even though they're on the private? Because you're talking about endorsing it as, then, and Michael, just you said the most pure way, which was the first, middle, DBA, first, middle, last, and on the back of the checks. So are we coming back from the private into the public to manage that escrow account through a public account or public commercial bank account?
What I'm saying is this: if you have a bank account at all, you're still endorsing them. In other words, if you're going to have a bank account, Belize will give you a bank account. Okay? Guatemala will give you a bank account. The offshore bank accounts, there's nothing wrong with them. If you absolutely have to have a bank account. I personally have not had one for 20 years. I'm doing just fine.
Right.
I have different ways I do things. I do most things, if not all things, in postal money orders. I send those out. That's backed by gold and silver. So,
yeah, Keith, let me stop you one there. Postal money orders. If next time anybody goes and buys a postal money order, look at it carefully. It does not say pay to the order of there. You cannot order up new Fed credit with postal money orders.
That's correct. It says pay to.
And to the order of is the language of negotiability, which means you cannot assign a postal money order either. It's non-negotiable.
And that's why you do that. Now, if you're on the private side and you have a job, just start getting a check and then go to their bank and cash it. I did that for years until I decided to start telling people, look, I just want cash. And people started paying me in cash. I just asked for it, and they said, sure. They went to the bank and got it. That was it. So how they ever did their transaction, that's fine. How I did mine, that was the way it worked. Now, if they want postal money orders, you want to do that, that's fine too. The post office will cash your postal money order if you want to do that. Then you just do this same thing. Demand for lawful money. Per Title 12, Section 411, and then put your first middle name, and then usually a lot of the postmasters will know you if you do business with them a lot, and then they go from there. It's not really that difficult.
Well, after a while, the more you get better skilled at this, you just tell whoever you're going to do work for, hey man, I work for cash. I mean, you want me to work for you or not?
A lot of people work for companies.
Well, I agree. That's not a useful solution for a lot of people. And I will say to those people that work for companies, more than likely you can't take employee unless you fill out a W-4 form.
Hold on a second, man. Okay, guys, you're on a conference call. When you move around, everyone can hear it. Please mute out.
Well, I was going to say, when you take employee with a company, the only thing the company can pay you with is federal credit. That's it. It's standing in the Fed. It can't pay you with anything else but the Fed credit.
Right, and then you get a check and then endorse it this way. That transfers it over to the other side. You're good to go.
Well, what if you come in and defeat it ab initio at the W-4 form, which is nothing but a waiver? You sign the W-4 form. Demand is made for lawful money.
You're on the other side.
What I'm trying to tell you is there is numerous ways to lick this thing. And what if you went in to go open up a checking account, and on the signature card you signed it, demand is made for lawful money, by signature?
That's a great question. Would you also then try and open up an account in the escrow holder's name that is attached to the Social Security number, or would you open up as, because that's your interface into the commercial realm, or would you try and open up with your first middle without an SSN and a modified W-8 Ben form?
Well, now if I take that back, you're talking a language that 1% or less of the people on this call comprehend. No one has any clue, I guarantee, how to go open up a checking account without a Social Security number. But you're right, it can be done, and you can open a non-U.S. person checking account But I'm saying for all the people that do not get it, that they're going to go down there and they're going to open up a checking account and they're going to slide a signature card in front of them. They're going to say, I want to see 2 forms of ID, and I want to see state-issued ID, and I want to see Social Security number. And you can do all that, and you can then just on the signature card write demand is made for lawful money and sign it, however the signature is on the driver's license, and you've just given the bank a priori before the fact notice that it better not be fractionalizing the monies that I use. I'm always going to, now that doesn't necessarily mean you couldn't slip up one time and sign the back of your check, blanket endorsement, and not make a demand for lawful money. But what it does mean is if somebody were to ever come back on you and say, aha, you didn't, that check right there for $7,000, you didn't redeem it, so you owe us a return. You say, oh, hold on a minute here. We got us a contract here in the form of a trust. On the signature card, it was signed, demand is made for lawful money. I made my demand before the fact. Now they got a big problem. So how you lick the problem is your business. There's many different ways to do it, but I would posit to you, be a court of competence. Keep your records. Keep track of every single check you ever handle, and make copies of it. And if anybody comes knocking, you got your records, and you'll have a gigantic smile on your face when they leave, and you're left alone for the rest of your life.
Michael Joseph, I know there's some other advanced people on the call too. Do you see any problem with opening up or with operating a commercial bank account as the first middle and without an SSN and a non-U.S. Citizen account and operating in that realm? Is that, Keith, is that going to be trespassing if one can do that? And now you can deposit
not if you're on the lawful side. There's no trespass there.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, we're in the private to keep from trespassing on this federal credit crap. Okay, the Federal Reserve stuff. In other words, just to stay out of their way. Now, now that we're moving forward, have you noticed that we're making little baby steps here? On okay, now we got you way out of the system. Now let's move you back in on the right side. In other words, where you can still operate, and that was kind of a test for a lot of people to see what they would do. Am I going to give all this up to do what's right, or what am I going to do? And that went on for about 3 or 4 years. And we got a good group of people that are willing to, do the right thing, want it really bad. Didn't matter what kind of pain or whatever they went through. That's the people for sure wanted to be on the right side. Now we're moving forward to where you're operating, and then how you're operating determines on whether you get messed with or not. The lawful money part, because money's everything with this Federal Reserve, that money part is where the dividing line is. Remember, I always said government, and I'm sorry about this, Yahweh, but Yahweh and law and government does not motivate people. Money motivates people, and Yahweh knows that. And unfortunately, the people in the Federal Reserve, they know that too.
If you look at the story about money in the scriptures, when Jesus came in and he saw that the priests were sitting in we'll call them money changers. You see, they had the shekel and the half shekel, but they knew that a lot of foreigners were coming, and a lot of poor people were coming into to the temple, and the only acceptable currency in the temple was the half shekel. But a lot of foreigners were coming in, and they had different forms of currency. And so what they were doing is they were exchanging the half shekel for another form of currency, and they were charging them a lot more for that exchange right there in the temple. And Yeshua took a cat of nine tails and laid it on their backs. All right? So, that's what, Yah's talking about. I detest false balances. So I want to, Keith mentioned money backed in gold, and I want to show you that Federal Reserve notes are backed in the par value of gold, but not necessarily backed in gold. All right, so look, if you look at an ounce of gold today, and I haven't looked at the spot price of gold, but I'm just going to say it's $1,200. I don't know what it is. Okay, but if you go look at the Federal Reserve's webpage, you'll find that it takes $42.22 of lawful money to buy a troy ounce of gold, and it takes $1,200 to buy a troy ounce of gold on the other side. Now, they're taking your labor and they're exchanging your labor for more than a 26-to-1 difference. All right? Now, France at one point found the gold window, the teller exchange, and they started exchanging lawful in and out of private credit to lawful money based on gold. And Nixon sent his boys down to talk to the people that were doing that, and they went to Jamaica and they held an accord, and it's now public law. I mean, you can't do it. They shut down that gold window. And if you try to do it, you know, you better get running is all I got to say. So it's still based on the par value of gold, but it's not based in gold.
Right. Yeah. I get it. Okay.
So what has the backing of Federal Reserve notes? Well, you do.
Your butt.
If you endorse it, that's exactly your butt. So now you say, well, I went down to the courthouse the other day, and they got me for driving with no license, and the man says I better pay $150 or I spend 6 months in jail. I mean, what the hell kind of bullshit is that? I didn't hurt anybody, you know. Where's the injured party? Well, you endorsed the private Federal Reserve. You agreed by your vote on the back of the voting ballot known as the check. So stop doing it. So anyway.
Now later on we can get into bonds and dealing with that. That will be a couple weeks down the road because we've got to get onto that side of it, the right side of that kind of deal, if we deal with bonds at all. But I'm just saying that as far as the insurance people are having trouble with and all that, I have still yet to connect the bonds with the Gutenberg Bible. So that's my next trek, if you might say, of me looking into that and how that gets done on the right side. Because there's got to be a way to do it. And somebody got knocked off the phone. So that's that part. I'm still looking into this. I did share some surety bond issues with contracts and dealing with attorneys and why they were going in and doing between the banks. I don't know if I want to get into that tonight or not. It says, what about using a prepaid debit card? Well, you're still endorsing the Fed there.
Hey, Keith.
Yeah.
Let's get on. Let's do the surety thing tomorrow night on Blog Talk.
Okay. Yeah, we can talk about that tomorrow night on Blog Talk Radio.
Just so everybody's listening, this surety thing that is going to be discussed tomorrow night, it's huge, really, really big, and you're not going to want to miss this. And if you do, you're definitely going to want to download it and listen to it.
Yeah, because it deals with mortgages, and it deals with banks, and it deals with foreclosures and all that stuff, and also is connected with surety bonds and attorneys. So
remedy to foreclosures. Remedy to foreclosures.
You might want to listen to that because it deals with basic contract 101. It's something that I think a lot of people, if not all, a lot of people have missed in dealing with foreclosures, myself included, until I sat down and read a mortgage document that was sent to me. And that led me to where we were there. And once you read the contract itself, your remedy is right in the contract and the mortgage agreement. So, to any type of foreclosure whatsoever. And this will work in non-judicial states as well as judicial states.
Don't tell the ending of the movie till tomorrow night.
No, I'm not going to say a word till tomorrow night. If you want to go to Blog Talk Radio, it's on Republic Restored. We go on at 9 o'clock, and I will sit and discuss it with you for 2 hours, and then we have a letter written up for it, so people can start using it. We've got a test case on it right now, and we'll know something by tomorrow on what they're going to do with this issue. It's a huge issue. It is the biggest gaping hole in foreclosure procedures that you've ever seen in your entire life, and it's right there, and it's obvious.
It's going to help a lot of people. A lot of people.
Hey, Keith, this is Michael Joseph again. I just want to thank you for having me on the call tonight.
All right, yeah, we didn't mind. We didn't want. Just explain to your buddy there. I was just trying to get it to where it was simple for people, because when he'll talk, I remember back in the day when I used to talk on programs back in '96, I sounded like an attorney. I lost people at man.
David's an extremely intelligent man, and if you know, he's out there on a lot of places on the internet in these chat rooms, and he you know, it took me 2 years to wrap my mind around this, that I understood that it took me a long time to get it because I couldn't see the trust. But when I got the trust, I got it, and when you get it, it'll become so simple to you that it's just like, how did I miss it?
Right, and it's just a matter of, we'll get to you in a second, ma'am. It's just a matter of endorsing a check a certain way. Whether you're going to have IRS problems or you're not going to have IRS problems. Whether you're going to have an IRS lien or not an IRS lien. So if you have an IRS lien, turn the thing over and endorse it that way and send it back to them. That tells them, oh, okay, well, he's not endorsing us anymore. So the more that we mess with him, the worse it's going to become for us. So they're going to go on to the next guy and the next guy and the next guy. Okay, ma'am, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Lynn. I want to ask
Lynn.
I want to ask one more time. On an IRS lien or a notice that there's going to be a lien, what you're saying is you turn it over on the back and you endorse it as June Hannah, DBA June Hannah Doe, if that's the way the IRS thing reads, and then you're going to put the statement of the Title 12, Section 411.
Stop.
You always put disclaimers in front of your signature. The very last thing on any page should be your signature. Nothing goes below your signature.
Why?
That's the way it goes. You always disclaim first and then set your signature. If you set your signature first, then you're with full liability for everything. I mean, you always set your signature last, and therefore everything before applies. You set your signature first, it's blanket. Nothing after it applies.
All right, but you just said on a check, you endorse the check, and then you write...
No, that's not what he said.
Okay.
That's not what he said.
Okay, so you always put demand is made for lawful money as per Title 12, Section 411, and then the June Hannah, DBA June Hannah Doe, which matches your, any ID that they may have put on the front.
Well, let me just say this, that's the purest way of doing it, and that is the correct way to doing it. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't know what you're doing, you better go ahead and just get ready for you're walking into a hornet's nest, because the first thing the bank manager is going to say is, have you got a DBA filed in the county? What's this DBA? What's the business you're running? He doesn't know that it's a Sesta trust, that legal name's a trust. He doesn't know that. And believe me, the numbskull down there that's the bank manager doesn't know his half in a hole in the ground, and he's going to have to call legal. But if you don't know what you're doing, they're going to know quick. the teller's going to know within 5 minutes if you're just looking in your eyes. And so, I would suggest if you're first getting started, just sign the name that's on the driver's license. Just make the name match, and it doesn't matter. What you've just perfected the law. You made your demand for lawful money.
Michael Joseph, I don't know if you caught what she's asking.
Wait a minute, Lenny. Let's clear that up again, because he just said just sign the name that's on it. Now people think, oh, well, I just signed the back in that name of the driver's license, I'm good. No, that's not what he said.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. He said demand for lawful money. Write this down. Demand for lawful money per. Don't put pursuant, because you're not an attorney. And you're not a corporation doing business as something. So, demand for lawful money per Title 12, Section 411. Put a comma and sign it your first and middle name. That's it. Nothing more to it than that.
First, middle, and what I'm trying to tell you is if your driver's license is signed first, middle, you put first, middle. In other words, what's on that signature card had better match your driver's license, had better match the signature on the back of the check. So if you've got first, middle...
Hold on, Lenny.
If you've got first, middle on your driver's license, you'd better have it on the signature card, and you'd better have it on the back of the check. If you've got first, middle, last on your driver's license, it better be that way on the signature card, and it better be that way on the check. And don't play games with them, because they'll jerk you around if you don't know what you're talking about. And until you get skilled and you know what you're talking about, go in there with what works. Whatever's on your driver's license, you make sure that's the same name you sign on the back of the check.
All right, Lenny?
I don't think Lynn was asking about a check. I think she was asking about an IRS lien and taking that lien and flipping it over on the back side.
That's
exactly.
That is
That's
a check.
Exactly.
That is a check.
Okay. All right. Just want to make clear.
And notice the lien is a check. It's demand for payment. That's what it is.
Okay.
They did a notice of lien, and that's a demand for payment to them.
Now, what I'm trying to tell you is you might get fancy. You might say demand is made for lawful money per 12 U.S.C. 411, comma, without recourse, comma, without prejudice, and put as many disclaimers as you want to in there. I don't really care. It doesn't really mean a hill of beans, because the moment you made a demand for lawful money, you're out of the Federal Reserve. Without prejudice just reserves all your rights. Without recourse would keep them from coming back on you. But, what's your intent? If you start putting a mile long of disclaimers on the back of a check, the teller's going to look at you and go, and you can pretty much bet the next call they make is the legal department.
So I always like to kiss it. Keep it simple, stupid. Because you're dealing with simple, stupid over at the other side of the teller. That's simple, stupid. So if she just looks at it, demand is made for lawful money per Title 12, Section 411, and sign it, whatever's on your driver's license or ID card, then they're going to look at that and go, oh, okay. They probably won't even look at it.
In most cases, they don't. But in some cases where they do, they'll look down. The next place they look is right in your eyes. And if you're looking down, you're looking left, you're looking right, they're going to say, sir, ma'am, we can't do this. And you're going to be sitting there going, but he said it would work.
Hey, I did it today. I went through the drive-through, and it was a small check. It was, under $100. Went through the drive-through, had it all on there, and they just cashed it and sent it back to me. No questions, no nothing.
No One guy said, look at my wealth. He said, this guy is talking theory. He says they call legal. In a smaller town, they call the police.
Well, no, they won't give you any problems. If you come in in confidence and you know it doesn't matter if it's 1,000 or 50,000, you're going to get cash. Now, if it's over 10,000, what are they going to do? They're going to pull you aside and they're going to fill out a suspicious activity report. And they have to do that because the trust, which they're moving under and which you've agreed to be a part of, requires them to. The bylaws of the trust require them to fill out a SAR on anything over 10,000 in cash. So just know the rules.
Hey, Keith?
Yeah.
Hey, where do I need to go to get the archive for this segment?
85-200.
85-200.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll talk to you.
Okay, thanks.
All righty.
Okay, one last question. Early in the call, you were talking about presentments that you get from, say, the cell phone company, the electric company, whatever. Now, if their coupon is actually a check, then if we put on the back side this same verbiage, what are you sending with it?
Well, you better
postal money order.
You better lay down. In other words, when you get that sent to you, if you think you're going to just put that on the back, you're going down a path that's full of thorns. No, that path, there's not a full lane paved road there, and you're going to go down a thorny path if you do that. You'd better pave the road first, but you better maybe you need to talk to their CFO and let them know what you're doing, and let them know the nature of the trust relationship and what exactly you're doing, so that they comprehend the nature of what you're up to, and they know they're going to get paid, and they know how they can get paid. All right. If you just think you're going to do that, even though it's not a problem with you doing that, if you think you're going to do it and it's going to be successful, then it may not. But I'd venture to say more than likely it's not. You're going to be met with legal department going, what the heck is this? Which is basically refusal for cause. Explain yourself. What are you doing here? Remember, trustee is always guilty. Trustee is always guilty, and trustee must explain himself or herself. It's the way it goes. Most trustee must prove. In equity, trustee is always guilty, and trustee always pays. So that full all caps name is an express trust, and you're the one who's acting on its behalf, so therefore you're trustee. I won't go any further, but you'd better lay the groundwork first of what you're up to before you do that. And if you don't understand what I just said, then you got a long ways to go before you even think about doing that.
Right. There's another book that you guys might want to read before you get started, and it's called the Errant Sovereign Handbook. I've got that. I can put that out on the group. That book is probably one of the best books I've ever read. It was made by Augustus, or written by Augustus, and I think he's dead now. But I sent that out to the Yisrael Nation group just to get some feedback from it on others and what they thought, and they absolutely loved it. And he's got a couple of letters there dealing with simple letters dealing with IRS, also dealing with property taxes, and that type of thing. And everything I'm telling you, as far as being on the private side with the 101 and rural route and everything else, will get you set up for that particular book. And he's got 1 or 2, 3 letters in there that have worked every time, not just once, but every single time, in dealing with IRS issues, property tax issues, stuff like that. And it's a very good way of thinking, and and it helps you quite a bit. And it's 112 pages. But if you want, if somebody wants me to, I'll go ahead and put the book up on the group, which is the County at Large Exodus Ministry, and y'all can read it. I would suggest you take 6-7 hours out of your day and just sit and read that book. That will make you go. That will move you forward at lightning speed. on how to handle these things, because you're dealing with sovereign elector, body sovereign issues, and when you say sovereign elector, that's a completely different status than voter. Whole different thing. And then later on, we'll get you into free trade zones, what that means, judicial districts, all that kind of stuff. Because people are saying, well, how are you guys getting these boxes open and stuff like that? Well, we're getting private mailboxes open through free trade zones. Which means in order for the IRS to get here, they got to go through a free trade zone. That's kind of not an option for anyone. So you'll keep building barriers upon barriers upon barriers, but you'll still be able to operate normally.
See, I'll say this. If you might have noticed in your life that there's a name that keeps showing up over and over again, and it's in all caps every single time. And, you know, maybe that name's even registered on the registry rolls down there to register to vote. Maybe, you know, I mean, you wonder how it is that they find you. Like it takes literally two minutes for them to find you. Well, I mean, the address is on the driver's license. It's on the registry rolls. I mean, they go straight to the internet. It's in the register of deeds. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, there's like, if it takes any of the public officials more than 5 minutes to find you, I'll be shocked. And then people wonder, how is it that I keep getting spoiled? Well, they set a path before you, and you just went right down it. And, you know, so I would suggest to you that you might try to learn exactly what that legal name is, what it is, and you might think about why am I using that name?